Good afternoon, students. Now we're going into week 3 of our English 115 fiction class. So I hope you're enjoying the literature class so far, and that you're enjoying the fiction that we're reading so far. So as you can tell, the first part of the class we're covering fiction. So this week we're going to go over more about the different layers of a good story. And so last week I said that when you write a good story, it's like different layers of clothes. You have different layers of meaning. When you're a child, your story form is very simple. You've got the villain, you've got the hero, or the hero walks off into the sunset with the lady, and happy ending. So children like something simple. But as we become adults and we revisit the same story, we expect a more complicated story that reflect our experience, something that we can empathize with. And so a good piece of literature is a story that has many interpretations. That is, you can have a group or a class room full of people, and everyone's reading the same story, but everyone comes to that story with a different point of view. And so when you write a story, you need to have the proper elements of fiction in order for your story to work, in order for your story to grab the reader's attention and keep the reader engaged in your story. So in order to have a good story, we're going to go over the elements of good fiction. And so let's get going as to what the elements of good fiction are. See, I'm trying to build the suspense, you know? You got the triggering event, which is this lecture and learning about fiction. Then you've got rising action, in which I'm not getting to the point yet. And then climax, in which we get to the highest, climax, the highest action. And then you have the resolution, which in this case, the resolution is you guys knowing the elements of a good story. So the most common elements of a good story includes plot, character, point of view, setting, theme, symbolism, and style. There are others that I'm going to go over in more detail, but first I want to go over these major elements of what makes a good story. Plot. So in the plot, that is what is the story about? So many students will, when they write their literature essay, spend way too much time retelling the plot to the reader, and that's not what we do. We want to analyze our interpretation of that story, not retell the story to the reader. So that's a common essay mistake in literature essays. So the plot is simply the story structure. In other words, when you ask the question, so what happened in the story? So that's the plot. And the plot usually follows the classic story structure of triggering event, rising action, climax, then falling action, and resolution. Okay, so that's the story arc. Okay, the plot. Character. The character are the people that are in the stories, and there are different kinds of characters. You have some characters that are fully developed and very complex, while and they change throughout the story and evolve. And then you've got characters that never change. They're flat. They're just stock characters. So I'll go over that in more detail. That's characterization. Then you have point of view. Who is telling the story? Who's narrating the story? So I sort of went over this already when I taught English 101, first person, second person, third person. So if I write in the first person, then that's like a narrative, that's like a biography. I'm talking about myself. It's from my personal point of view. If I talk about it in the third person point of view, then that means that I'm talking about somebody else. In other words, what did George do for during the weekend? George went to the store. George did this, George did that. So when I tell you what somebody else did, okay, that's a third person case narrator. So that puts a little distance between me and the reader, is when I use third person case. So point of view is important. So it depends on what you, the writer, want to express to the reader. Do you want a personal, casual tone? Then you would use first person case. Do you want a more far away, distant kind of, like godlike a tone, in which you're a know-it-all, omnipotent narrator telling the story? Usually an older, sometimes it's an older narrator telling a younger reader the life lessons. Okay, then that you would have, then you could use omnipresent, very, very powerful, like all-knowing narrator. Setting is what takes place, where it takes place, the time it takes place. In other words, the context. So when did this story take place? Did it take place during the Civil War? Did it take place during World War II? Where did it take place? Did it take place in China, in Florida? So that's the setting, the time and the place. Theme. What are the major ideas of the story? Is it a story about love, revenge, betrayal, jealousy, anger? For instance, if you wanted to read Moby Dick and Captain Ahab had his foot bit off by Moby Dick, the whale, and then Captain Ahab is filled with such rage against that whale for biting off his leg that that's all that's on his mind is to hunt down that whale and kill Moby Dick. And so he's like so filled with revenge. So that's the main theme is revenge. Get back at Moby Dick. So that's an example of theme. Or Romeo and Juliet, tragic love. What else? Betrayal. That sort of thing. So there are many different themes in a story. Then you've got symbolism. So if you want to think about going back to Moby Dick, what does Ahab and Moby Dick symbolize in real life? Because a lot of stories, they teach life lessons. That's how you can apply what you read in stories to your life. And so Moby Dick, for instance, teaches us that if we just let vengeance consume us, in the end, it kills us. Because at the end of Moby Dick, Captain Ahab gets eaten by Moby Dick in the end. So if you focus only, you let anger and jealousy consume you, at least that's what that's the life lesson that story teaches you. In Chinese literature, I think I remember I told you this, that all literature in China was written in order to teach people good morals. So stories were a way to engage the young and keep them interested in the topic. So in order to have, and also the last element of fiction, style. And what I mean by style is the tone. Is the tone of the story nostalgic, formal, casual, exciting? In other words, what emotions does the story evoke in the reader? So to briefly go over the exciting or the elements of a good story: plot, what the story is about; character, the people in the story; point of view, who is narrating the story; setting, where and when the story takes place; theme, main idea of the story: love, vengeance, revenge; symbolism, in other words, what life lessons is the story trying to teach us; style, what tone does the story evoke in us: excitement, fear, anger, empathy. So those are the most common. So in order to have a good story, you have to have an engaging plot, very good characterization. So I'm going to go deeper into additional layers of storytelling. So those were the basic, what I just went over are the basic what you need to have a good story. Additional layers of storytelling in order to tell a complicated, for the sophisticated reader, you would want different kinds of characters. You wouldn't want all of your, so I'm going to go over all the different kinds of characters, characterization, and I'm going to also go over again antagonist, protagonist, I'll talk a little more about setting, mood, archetype. And then I'm going to go over again your reader, the difference between, I know I touched upon this in lecture 2, the difference between a reader response essay and a reader response journal. Now for the first 2 weeks, all you do is just reader response journal. And it's only in week 3 that you're going to be doing a reader response essay. So the first 2 weeks you get to have casual writing in which you just write about what what your reaction to what you're reading has been. And then in week 3 you're going to write a literature essay. In other words, thesis statement, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion, and ENGL 101 all over again, just with literature. Anyway, so let's go over the additional layers of storytelling. So you want to have characters. So first one, characters and characterization. You want to have characters of different depths. So if you're a writer, you're going to make sure you have some characters who are round, what's known as round characters, that is complex characters, 3-dimensional characters, just like real people. That's a round character. A flat character is something that's one-dimensional, like a stock character. He's just kind of like a prop used in the background. So that would be a stock character, someone that doesn't change. So that's a flat. So a flat character or a stock character is a one-dimensional character that remains the same throughout the story, whereas a round character is a complex character who evolves throughout the story and changes and grows up by the end of the story. A static character is similar to a flat character where he just stays the same, static. A dynamic character is very similar to a round character. A dynamic character is a character that's complex and evolves over time. Confidant. The confidant is the person with whom, or to whom, the main character or the protagonist talks to. So let me go over the different kinds of characters. You have the round character. That means he's very rounded out, lots of description about this character. You've got the flat character, one-dimensional. Static character. That means he never changes. Usually the static character is the same as the flat character. So if you're going to name Mr. Smith, he is the flat, static character who's one-dimensional and does not evolve over the course of the story. Usually they're interchangeable. Then you have the round, complex character together with dynamic. Usually it's the complex character or the round and dynamic character that changes within the story. And that tends to be the protagonist. Okay? Sometimes the confidant remains the same, but that depends on the story. Okay? But usually the protagonist is the one that changes. He's the hero that matures. But occasionally it could be the villain too when you have it. So the different kinds of round, flat, static, and dynamic. And so in your analysis, your character analysis of the story for this week, you're going to tell me who are the dynamic and round characters in the story and who are the flat and static characters in the story. You can even, and if you're a writer, you can tell me, but why do we have some really rounded out, well-developed, complex characters, and why do we have the flat characters? I think that the rounded out, complex characters represent us. It represents the main character. It represents the person we know best in life. And then the flat and static characters tend to represent old people who have already changed, and so they stay the same, or they represent strangers who are to the side. Just like in real life, you know yourself really well so that you know you're complex. But then when you see people to the side of you, you think of they might be static and flat because you don't know them very well. So that's one reason why in a story you have that variation. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, so those are the different kinds of characters and characterization. And then here you have the antagonist, which I talked about, which is the the bad guy, because as I mentioned in my other lecture, whenever you have good drama, you got to have two characters that are in conflict with each other, okay? And so for every protagonist, he needs an antagonist. And so when you're writing your book, so let's say I'm going to write a book about one character is really strong in math, then that's the protagonist, strong in math. Then the antagonist would be someone weak in math. In other words, he is like the antagonist and protagonist are opposites, polar opposites that conflict, so that whenever something happens, they'll react in opposite directions. And then whatever happens in the story, well, then opposite things will happen to them, creating friction, and that creates the drama within the story. That creates the conflict in the story. Without conflict, you don't have a story. If I start a story with, and Jan and Jane and Jack and Robin all lived happily ever after, and that's all I say, from the first line to the last line. So would that be very interesting to you if I simply said Jack lived happily ever after? Jack lived a really good life. No, you'd walk away and your eyes would glaze over. People want action, so they want conflict. And so that's what makes a good story. So that's protagonist is the main hero. Antagonist is the opposite of the hero, usually. But the thing is, in a lot of modern stories, the antagonist is not always the villain. Okay? In a really modern story that's sophisticated, they make the antagonist look like the hero, and the protagonist becomes the villain. For instance, if I were to write a story in which Batman suddenly becomes corrupt, but the Joker is the hero, then it's a twist. And that's another way of writing a good story, is to twist the stereotypes. You twist the expectations, because the expectation is that you expect Batman to be the hero and you expect Joker to be the villain. And when you twist around the expectations, that also makes a good story. But that's beyond the realm of this particular chapter. An archetype. An archetype is just different kinds of heroes. Different kinds of characters. In other words, character types. So I already went over, you got the round character, the flat character, the static character, and the dynamic character, right? So that's like the overall umbrella of all characters everywhere, male or female. Now I'm going to narrow characters down even more into the different types of characters that you see in society, or the different types of characters that you will see in a story, such as a hero, a villain, a lover, an outlaw, a magician, a explorer, a sage, a creator, an innocent, a caregiver, a jester, an everyday man, and a ruler. Those are the different kinds. So if you're writing a story and you're thinking, okay, what kind of characters should I have in my story? And then you come up blank. Well, that's why knowing the different kinds of characters, then you have more in your treasure chest, in your brain, with which to work with in order to create a good story. So most stories have a lover, an outlaw, like Billy the Kid, even though he was really, a real person. Outlaw would be, let's try Star Wars would be, I forget the name of the, Darth Vader. Oh, good, I remembered. Okay, not the outlaw, he's like the villain, okay? The lover, I can't remember the name of, Romeo and Juliet. Romeo, okay, so Romeo, when you say someone is a Romeo, a lover, magician, that would be the King Arthur and Merlin. Yeah, he's the magician, and Merlin was both a magician and a sage, both. So you have the lover, outlaw, so I'll say that slowly. The different kinds of archetypes. So archetypes are different kinds of characters that you can find in a story. Common archetypes that you find in a story are lover, outlaw, magician, sage, creator, someone who represents an innocent, caregiver, and a jester. Jester, the everyday man, such as Homer Simpson represents the everyday man. Everyday man, ruler, King Arthur. I always think, whenever I think ruler, I think King Arthur in all his majesty and the robes, that sort of thing. So that's an archetype. In other words, you have a certain expectation of what the lover is going to be like. You have a certain expectation of what the outlaw will look like and sound like. And so a lot of writers like to turn the archetype around in order to have fun with the reader. That's also another way to make the story interesting, is to write against stereotype. Yeah, it's kind of like a stereotype, yeah. Because we all build images. When you say lover, you have this image in your head of a Romeo. And if you say magician, you have this image in your head of Merlin. So to me, archetype is like this mental representation in my head of what I expect a character to be in a story. Kind of like collective consciousness. Okay, and so that's it for, and mood. I think I covered mood is when you have, when the writer evokes your emotions. That I covered before. Whether the story makes you feel nostalgic or happy, sad, angry, indignified, whatever. Okay, so that's the mood of the story. A somber mood. Stephen King, in his stories, the mood is scary, horror and suspense. Okay, so that's the mood in his stories, in Stephen King. Anyway, so this week you're going to write a reader response essay. And so I went over the reader response essay in your announcements. That's it. I wrote down in the announcements the difference between, because the first 2 weeks you just did the reader response journal, and you guys did a really great job with your reader response journals. I remember when I was teaching literature to 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders, I had all my students keep a notebook, and of literary journal, of an idea journal, of a writing journal. And in that notebook, the students were free to write poems, they were free to write their own short stories, they were free to react to whatever stories they were reading in class. So when you react to what you read, that's known as the reader response. As I said, I think I did that in week 2. And so a reader response essay simply is your response in essay format, where you analyze your response to what you read, or to something that you read, or to something that you're assigned to read. And so that's a reader response essay. And then, of course, just like any other essay, you need to have a thesis statement, you need to have 3 body paragraphs, and you need to have a conclusion. And so, as anyone who's taken my English 101 class knows, the thesis statement follows the formula topic, opinion, reason. And then the 3 reasons that you state in your main idea sentence, and then you write the body paragraphs based on those 3 reasons. And so we are going to be using the 5-paragraph essay structure for our reader response essay. So you have to avoid trying to retell the story. Avoid retelling the plot in your paper. So if you feel the need to tell me what the story is about, then what you do is write a 5-sentence summary of your story in your introduction before the thesis statement. So then it's okay, because then you're setting up the context for your thesis statement. So for your reader response essay, this is going to be your structure. You're going to write me an engaging hook. That is the first sentence that grabs the reader's attention. Then you're going to write 5 background sentences. And for a literature essay, you're going to tell me the plot of the story. Okay? And so that will be in 5 sentences in the middle of your intro. And then the last sentence of your intro will be your thesis statement. Your topic, main idea, and reasons. You could say, for example, Mr. Smith is a round and dynamic character because he went from being a boy to a man. He saved many lives. He he is a hero and a school is named after him. Okay, then you have 3 events that tell you why Mr. Smith is a round, dynamic hero. And then those three elements become your body paragraphs, in which you will have one paragraph about why they named the school after him, why he's a hero, and how he changed. In other words, the 3 reasons why Mr. Smith is a round, dynamic hero. Or the opposite, Mr. Smith is a flat, static character who never changed during the story, because he did not evolve at all. He stayed the same, and he's one-dimensional. They barely mention him. Then you're going to write your 3 paragraphs. So basically, that's how your reader response essay differs from your reader response journal, where in your journal you could just free write whatever you want. But when you write a reader response essay, you have to have your thesis statement, body paragraphs, because in an essay we analyze the topic, we do comparison contrast, just like we did with in ENGL 101. Okay, so that's what you're going to do, and then you're going to be assigned what to write. And I think at some point you get to choose what story you want to analyze. So you can tell this is the first time I'm teaching this class, because I can't remember all the different assignments like I did with ENGL 101. I could just tell you this. The more times I teach a class, the better I know all the different assignments. So I just know that you get it at one point. I think, it is in week 3. You get to choose your short story. There's 20 short stories, and then that you get to choose from, and you get to. So I think I created all the links, so that way you can just link on it. Originally, they wanted you to find all the stories, so I did you a favor. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so I created the links, and if you have any questions about how to write the essay, or you're getting stuck on the thesis statement, or stuck on your analysis, you can always email me, and then we can discuss together what you want to write. So that means you need to read the story first, then think to yourself, okay, then you write about the assignment. That's when we get together, after both of us have read the story, and then we're doing the pre-writing part of the writing process, where we're trying to cook up a good thesis statement and trying to cook up a good outline, and so on and so forth. So in the pre-writing stage of your essay, feel free to email me, and then we can work together to brainstorm a topic. Oh, that's the same thing with the reading journal too. If you're having trouble figuring out what to write for that as well, you can also contact me, and I put my contact information in the professor's corner. Let's see, what else? Oh, okay, I did all of that. I did the difference between a reader response. I did this. Oh, okay. And then I think I gave the example of Wizard of Oz, where I said that the Wizard of Oz represents the 3 parts of the human soul.
Unknown caller.
In which it represents the 3 parts of the human soul, in which, you got Dorothy, innocence, then you have the Tin Man represents love, and the lion represents courage. And then you would write love, courage, and intelligence, innocence in your body paragraphs. So that when you have a thesis statement with matching body paragraphs, then you have 5-paragraph essay structure. Yeah, so that's going to be your that's for your reader response essay. I hope I covered everything that's in my notes, which is why I write notes in the first place. Okay, and that's it for week 3. So in week 3, you're doing the elements of fiction, and I hope that you found this lecture interesting and helpful for your week 3 assignments. And if you have any questions, see, that's how I segue always into my, the ending. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me anytime.